We're now going to move straight into the panel led by Mary. Over to you.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you very much to all of our speakers. That was really informative and comprehensive, actually, as well. I love talking about Western Australia. We all like talking about Western Australia, don't we? So I would love to spend a little bit more time talking about what's happening here. And I know that we talked about Adash briefly, Vikas, and actually I think, is Faz here? Faz Pollard was on one of the panels last year, so that's been an amazing progress from where we were at in, I think it was February last year to now. But what are the challenges and the successes that you're seeing here in Western Australia, Vikas?
Is that good? Can you hear me?
I think they look like they're both on.
What about this one? Is that better? Okay. So WA is it's not like no other place in the world, right? I mean, of course, it's better than any other place. Yes. But there's a real challenge with moving materials the distances they need to move. And that includes recycling. It's really difficult to set up to collect commingled recycling other than, Perth and surrounds, because you've just got to move it that far. And the population's so sparse. Really, the key that's shifting is, the government's been really active for several years in trying to rethink what's happening with the recycling, of course, at federal level, but in WA specifically. Adash is one of the companies that's leveraged some of the incentives that are coming out of government, but the government's still looking for other solutions for recycling. It's not always local, right? It doesn't always have to be local. There are economies of scale that are achieved by moving materials to other parts of the world. I don't know if you know this. Okay, where do you think, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question. How much of the aluminium cans that you put back in CDS or you put in your commingled recycling bins, how much of that is recycled in Australia? 0. Okay. How many people knew that? How many people know that all of the aluminium that's collected in Australia gets shipped somewhere else in the world to be recycled? How many people knew that? Okay, I'm seeing about 10 hands. What about glass? All the glass that's collected in WA, where do you think that goes? South Australia. Do you know what it is by train from Perth to Adelaide? Thank you. Thanks, Josh. So it's not always possible to have local solutions that fit. There are exceptions, like Adash. They're at a scale where they can take fibre out of the local market and recycle it. And I think it's really important that more projects like that grow here, and we'd certainly like to support them. I'd love to talk about the collection challenge, but maybe I'll let you come back to that. Yeah,
well, I mean, I underscored when Jackie was talking about the fact that the Browns cartons were recyclable in Australia, that was actually an important distinction that was being made that perhaps consumers don't really quite realise yet, because of, as Vikas has just illustrated.
Yeah, so obviously there's been a big push for a long time for onshore recyclability, and the Save Board has enabled the recyclability of liquid paperboard in Australia, and that's a huge step. It makes a really big difference to think that you're not integrating miles for packaging to go offshore. It's really important that it's done onshore.
Yeah. Nerida, can I go to you? I would love to ask you what a success story like Browns means for the industry more broadly, and its capacity to tell a story about its value and particularly as we try to kind of socialise changes in packaging to meet, to end food waste and the reasons why we need to innovate.
Oh, wow. Brown's Dairies is a success story, one, because it came out of WA, and I'm not saying that because I'm sitting in WA. The fact that it's innovative. A lot of people don't understand that we actually are extremely innovative in Australia and New Zealand, We take risks when we do our packaging design, and on a global scale, hence why they won the World Star, we're recognised for those risks and innovations. And so Brown's Dairies, because there was 2 iterations of it, and it moved to a renewable material, it was also about understanding the sustainable packaging design guidelines that I mentioned, and actually shifting something that was challenged with recyclability and understanding that, and then going, okay, with our partners, how do we make sure that we meet our pulpability thresholds and make sure that it can be recycled or reprocessed in some way? And so, again, you can't go on the journey, the brands can't go on the journey without your suppliers and your manufacturers of your packaging, and it's that collaboration. And for me, that's the success story. It's the fact that they work together. They knew what the journey was for Browns, and to make sure that it was recycle ready and a renewable material, which met probably, I would say, at least 6 of the 10 SPGs. So that's why it's a success story.
Yeah. Jackie, can I go back to you on that then? Because I'm curious as to whether, as this process was being undertaken, everyone was aware of just how innovative and how groundbreaking it would be.
Probably not, I guess, because at the end of the day, like it was definitely, we knew that it would be an Australian first, and it was very innovative, certainly for Australia. There were a few, I think there was 1 or 2 suppliers that were using the cartons over in Europe. So, but it was just an opportunity that was presented. Like Tetra are great in that they used to come and present to us quite often. These are the opportunities, like Vikas did today. This is what we've got coming. This is what we can do. And so it was all about, well, this is available. This is what we can do it. We can make this work within our supply chain, make it work down the line. We can put the milk in it safely. It took a lot of trialling and it took a lot of effort and a lot of work. But at the same time, it was like, well, I think we can achieve it. So if we can, we definitely should do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Please.
One of the things that stood out, and we use it as a best practice case study globally, is that they also were really smart in their marketing. And so they took the customers on the journey of their sustainability. And credit to them, because they were one of the first to do it. And so when you look at the beautiful communications on pack, it's magnificent. It's a really good best practice case study on how to do it properly and how to educate the schools and bring them into the program. They have a whole program, education program.
Yeah, I'm curious in the kind of broader context then for all of you, in that while this is a good story and it has been communicated really well, there are other examples of packaging where it's not real. Like the benefits of this particular change in packaging are not real. There is greenwashing going on in the industry. Nerida, since you've got the microphone there, perhaps you could talk about that first.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, consumers think that if you eliminate plastic, therefore the paper's going to be better, and I'm not disrespecting anyone in the room that uses fibre. Don't misunderstand that, but you have to have the life cycle assessment to determine what materials you move to because of the environmental impacts. There are a lot of things, for example, the paper bottle that was shown this morning, that's greenwashing. End of day, it's greenwashing. Consumers might like it, but they don't understand the fact that that's a bladder. That's a wine bladder hiding inside paper. And so to a consumer, they look at that and go, oh, it's a paper bottle. It's much better than glass or RPPT or whatever, and it's not. And so the thing that we say when we're talking about design is stop, do your life cycle assessment, undertake that and determine the lowest. When you choose your material, do it by environmental impact. That's a really good example of greenwashing.
And that was a good example because, well, I was going to go to you, Vikas, because of your example about how there are proper innovations being made in such things.
Absolutely, and I think I'm just echoing partly what Nerida said. And I just also wanted to call out Kath Oates in your panel earlier was talking about some of the challenges with glass. I think we've got a real tendency as consumers to oversimplify or to try and shrink away or avoid the complexity. Actually, packaging is really complicated. Trying to contain gases moving across barriers, particular gases moving across barriers, containing odour, containing so many different things. The science and technology of packaging is light years ahead of where most people imagine it is, right? And yet we want to try and take this really grossly oversimplified view of how it should be or what's possible. And I think that's problematic. I was calling out cathodes because it's really amazing to hear someone on the inside of an industry that's so invested in glass fully across the issues with glass, to kind of go, actually, this isn't in a lot of ways the dream material people think that it is. So it's and I don't mean to bag, materials, but for me, it's a real opportunity to say, okay, let's have a more sophisticated conversation, like Nerida said, about really understanding the role of packaging and its environmental impacts and then taking the right action.
Well, let's stick with glass for a sec because, surely that is going to be a big story to communicate to people who enjoy fine wine that we're transitioning away from having our wines in glass bottles. But and I'm actually interested in, Jackie, your perspective on this about how we might go about communicating that to consumers. But because, can I ask you first of all, because you've told me about how you've enjoyed drinking wine from a paper carton. How is the experience?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because is it the product that you're enjoying, or is it the it's like...
It's all the aesthetics, isn't it? The whole
brand?
thing.
When you buy clothing, you're more interested... I've got an 18-year-old and he just wants to wear the brand, right? He's not interested in what the garment is. So there's a real challenge on that front. But maybe you want to pitch into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, like I said, familiarity with a format is real for consumers. Like, there's a ritual involved with opening a wine bottle and the glass and the way it feels in your hand and the chink on the glass when you pour it in there. So it's definitely something that we all have to be aware of, not to mention the fact that there's this sort of traditional stigma with goon bags and whatever. So, it's not going to be, it's not maybe making it more glamorous. It's going to be hard work. So consumers need to be really clear on why it's so much better. Why is there such a benefit involved in moving from glass to whatever it is, the other vessel that they move to? Yeah.
Please.
Alcohol's a really interesting area because I think it was Tristan this morning mentioned, if you go into Europe and you go into the aisles, they have massive rPET bottles of alcohol. And they all accept it. They have Tetra Paks, alcohol in Tetra Paks, and it's accepted. And one of the things that the Europeans always say through the WPO is it's the audience. So if it's a university student or a young person, they don't care. They're going to take what I call the goonie bag. They're going to take the rPET bottle. They don't care. If you're in a fancy restaurant or a five-star restaurant or you have a very, very expensive bottle of wine, you want it in glass. So it depends on, the product, and it also depends on your audience. And there's a significant shift. The Pacamama is a really good example, and I don't know if you know the flat-packed wine bottle, and it's an rPET, so it's a recycled content PET bottle, and it's flat. And for transport optimisation and material efficiency, it ticks more boxes than most. And it's absolutely brilliant, but a lot of people don't want that. So it just depends on the audience as well and the type of wine that you're drinking. Yeah. I don't know about Vicus's wine, but we might have to try it.
I think Hamoon's got some at his stall, so ask for sample.
Yeah, and the bag in box is coming back,
yeah.
And they're incorporating recycled content into their bladders, and they have FSC certifications on their paperboard. So there's a significant turnaround in the acceptance of the old university student guinea bags as well.
Well, we got to Europe again, which we seem to get to in these conversations. And I'm particularly interested because through World Packaging Organisation that Australia's actually doing really well on the world stage with packaging. Can you tell us a little more about why?
Because we take risks. Because I think we're so far away from the rest of the world, we have the opportunity to innovate. And also because we have the distance, the tyranny of distance. We just have different challenges. You can't compare scalability, volume, population. You just can't compare Europe. All too often we put Europe up on a pedestal, but you can't compare it to Australia. You can't compare the fact that Western Australia is sitting all the way over here and is unsupported with what we're doing on the eastern states. So we take risks, we're more innovative. I just want to just quickly say we have an annual awards program which is called the Australasian Packaging Innovation and Design Awards, or the PETAs for those in the room. And obviously Brands, Dairies and Tetra Pak have won quite a few of those awards. But it's also the exclusive entry for the World Star Awards. So for Australia and New Zealand, you can only go through the PETAs. We have won top 3 in the world And think about all the countries, Germany, India, China, Japan, and their populations and their volumes of packaging that are out there. Top 3 in the world for the last 4 years. Why? Because we're innovative and we take risk. And I'm really proud of that. Really, really proud of that.
Jackie was talking about the voluntary covenant, and you and I had been talking about that too, because of the risks attached to it being voluntary, and the fact that we need to move at greater pace and with greater ambition to get where we need to go. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, the 2025 national packaging targets will shift to the federal government national packaging design mandates. Eco-modulation, extended producer responsibility is going to have a significant shift. APCO will shift as well. So they'll eventually become an administrator of a regulation, which is incentives and penalisations. We're not even close to meeting our targets. We're not even remotely close to meeting our targets, because for 22 years we've sat on a voluntary commitment. And if you have a voluntary commitment, people don't care. And they go, oh, what are they going to do? The EPA is not going to come for me. I'm not going to get a fine. And unfortunately, that's what's happened. We have so much resource, what I call a resource, sitting in landfill and being exported to other countries, that we should be putting back into packaging. And our federal government finally said enough's enough, and they agreed with all the state ministers and said we're going to mandate it. The only way we can keep it out of the environment, out of the waterways and out of landfill is to mandate it. And mandating it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means if you're designing really good packaging, you won't pay as much. If you're designing stuff that's not recyclable, you're going to pay more.
Yeah. So one of the things that you mentioned was minimum recycled content. Do you know what proportion that will be?
No, and it'll be determined by different substrates, because they'll probably have exemptions for things. Don't quote me, but there'll probably be exemptions for things like paper or fibre. It'll be predominantly focused on plastic, because that's where the focus is. But there will be minimum recycled content in glass, aluminium, paper. We already have recycled content. That's normal. We do have advancements in PET and PP and HDP where we have recycled content, but it's not mandated. There'll be different exemptions for different materials.
So Vikas, how do you think that will kind of add pressure to the industry?
First, I just want to reiterate, what Nerida said, because I think that's 100% a great assessment of where we're at against the packaging targets and what needs to happen in APCO's future role. I have a really firm opinion that a lot of what we're doing is pretty piecemeal in terms of different bits of regulation and incentive looking at different parts of the sector. I think mandated EPR scheme, so for those who don't know, extended producer responsibility, so if you're the person putting a product in the market, you're responsible for what happens at the end of life of that product and its packaging. There are great existing schemes around the world, so we're not, not reinventing the wheel. And that was me in my fake German accent, because there's a great scheme in Germany, but
The veal.
there's also great schemes in France and Spain and Belgium. I like talking about the Belgian example. Overall recycling rate of 84% for packaging at a cost of €15 per person per year. That's what the scheme costs, right? And I think that giving a rebranded, reformed APCO the money to drive mandated EPR is the only way we're going to have a system solution across the country. And WA, NT, South Australia, but WA primarily, are case in point, right? There's no other way commercially to solve the issue with the way that people live in this state than with something like a mandated EPR.
Yeah, so the product stewardship programs are a perfect example under an eco-modulation tool that for example, you put the brand takes responsibility, they have to pay a certain fee for the volume of packaging they put out onto market, determined by the way they design their packaging, whether it's recyclable or not. Then what happens is a percentage of that could, if the federal government agree to it, and the state governments, could be put back into infrastructure and the advancement of technologies and the advancement of programs like SafeBoard, programs like RDASH. And that's what I would like to see. So it doesn't go in the coffers of the government, it goes back into advancing and improving recycling and reprocessing in this country, and that's where we need to be.
Jackie, I realise that you're not at Browns anymore, but I'm still curious about how, with all of these kind of additional pressures on the industry and the requirements to step up, where does that leave Browns in terms of the benefits of having led in that space? Are they, is it a comfortable feeling of we already got that, we don't have to worry about that anymore, or rats, I should have just waited until everyone was doing it?
No. Well, I mean, I don't work there anymore, but I think that for any food manufacturer, packaging is one portion of a very, very big sustainability strategy that now has to be in place, particularly in dairy, obviously. We've already heard some of the statistics there. And from a packaging perspective, certainly, like at Browns, there's already reusable crates. There's lots of other steps that can be taken and that are sort of in the works. So having a sustainability strategy and taking even that first step with the sustainable cartons really heightens the awareness within your business of sustainability, grows the excitement, grows the enthusiasm of the whole business to actually start to participate in this. People get involved, people learn about sustainability and they actually want to do more and they want to get involved more. So what I would say is that when businesses do take, small steps or steps towards being sustainable, it actually drives a culture within the business that is very contagious and makes everybody want to do more.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to ask, both Nerida and Vikas mentioned harmonisation, and I think it's a really interesting concept because it's such a hard, I don't think you mentioned it today, but earlier when we were talking, such a massive concept to think about how that could actually be achieved. I mean, we hardly ever harmonise on anything. So can that be achieved? Nerida, let's speak from the WPO perspective of where those conversations are at.
It's the only way that we're going to all achieve our own targets for whether it's recycling or reprocessing or recovery, harmonisation. Design needs to be harmonised. We need to be able to have one consistent set of design standards that everyone around the world can design to. We also need consistency in the programs. And so for me, if I jump into Australia, single-use plastic regulations, container deposit schemes, and everything else we do, we can't even agree on it. And you look at how many container deposit schemes we've got in this country, and whether someone wants a tethered cap and someone doesn't want a tethered cap, and all of those things. And the first step in Australia is to make sure that all states agree on single-use plastic regulations, all states agree on food waste targets, all states agree on container deposit schemes. And if we don't, we're not going to achieve the targets at all.
Vikas, would you like to add to that?
So two parts to it. One, I think in a country like Australia, it makes sense. It's not like what's happening in Tassie is vastly different to what's happening in Perth or Darwin. But I do think that there's, the harmonisation angle for me that stands out is what's happening with curbside collection. And when you get a harmonised collection for what you can put in your bin, there's a real opportunity to create a kind of national momentum. You're not trying to educate a few 100,000 or a couple of million people. You're trying to get the whole country over the line on what can or can't go in the bin. It's a simpler, more effective use of money to do that. Everybody knows, and then you can, I work in Japan and Korea as well, and trust me, in Japan and Korea, people will tell you if you put the wrong thing in the wrong place at the wrong time. You get told, not in an aggressive way, in a super friendly and helpful way, so it's really easy to do what you're being asked to do. But it just helps support the, oh, hang on, that doesn't go in the bin, because everybody knows it doesn't, right? Or everybody knows it does. From a recycler's perspective, it means that I can target the largest MRFs in the country. I can harvest the material that I want to harvest because I know they're all getting it. And I can secure tonnages that I can do something meaningful with. So absolutely for harmonisation.
Yeah, amazing. So I just want to ask about the packaging targets and how and if they relate to specific emissions reduction targets. Are they aligned? Are they defined in that way, or are the targets defined differently? I'll ask you first, Vikas.
And they're not. right? And that's a huge problem. I mean, we seem to be chasing either circularity or carbon rather than chasing both.
Interesting.
If we take the PPWR, they have carbon footprint for packaging, but they also have circular economy for packaging, so circular design, and they have to both have a part. They both have a role. Carbon footprint for packaging, measurement of carbon footprint for packaging is coming. It's going to come in Australia, 100%.
Yeah. As part of what's coming?
As a part of the national mandates,
Yeah.
yep.
So just because I'm a numbers nerd, starter for 10, contribution to global greenhouse emissions from packaging globally. Anybody know what that is? Anybody know how it compares to something else? There's a hand up in the
No,
back
that was
corner.
me being told how much
Okay.
time we had left.
Great. So it's more than global aviation, right? How many people are surprised
Yeah.
by that? How many people think that packaging does create more emissions than all those airplanes flying around the world? Well, it does, and that's a fact. So, packaging's an issue.
And packaging's demonised all the time. This is just my view, because they don't understand fit for purpose and functional, which is the whole point of packaging. And one of the challenges we have is they always talk about eliminating packaging. Let's eliminate packaging. The food waste is a higher environmental impact than packaging. Packaging is there to hold that, to capture that, so we don't have all of the emissions that are coming out of food waste, and people want to get rid of the packaging. So if we're going to have the conversation with Steve, packaging is critical to lowering their environmental impact. We have to do better consumer education. We need Jackie doing some marketing with Steve and do some really good marketing out there to consumers to understand packaging is 1/4 of the issue that we have with food.
Yeah, and to Jackie, probably just finally on this one, I'm really interested because it's actually a powerful story to tell consumers about how packaging and ending food waste are intertwined. Do you think that's communicated well?
I was very excited when I heard that Steve has got a big campaign coming up that's going nationally to really simplify food waste and how we can all help with that. Look, I think that there's definitely more that could be done, but yeah, there's a lot to communicate, and there's certainly a lot of the businesses in WA aren't big advertising spenders. Communication to consumers can be incredibly expensive, which is why we're talking about trying to combine our efforts so that when you're giving one message and across different packaging, that's difficult. So yes, there's definitely a lot more that could be done. I'm really hoping that it's integrated as part of the food waste communication. Yeah.
Please.
So just the AIP have a Save Food Packaging project with the CRC, which is about to end, and we're looking at a new one with the signatories of the Australian Food Pact, and it's going to be undertaking life cycle assessment on a number of categories across a number of packaging solutions. And the idea is that we're going to pick 4 or 5 of the high loss areas, and we will do life cycle assessment and research that will help you to make the right choice based on science when you move from one material to another in those categories, so we don't have the unintended consequence of food waste. So we're really excited about that project.
And just finally then, I mean, it crosses my mind, having spoken to you all beforehand, that this is quite a collaborative industry. And I wonder if there are even any really dastardly players in there. Everyone seems to be kind of going about doing, but you're going, maybe. But do you feel like what you're offering to the people in the room is enough support for what they need right now?
I mean, I can only speak from an AIP perspective. We do the best we can with no funding. So if there was additional support for funding, we could provide further training and education for SMEs. So from a personal perspective, from our institute's perspective, if the governments could contribute more to support some of the work that we're doing, we could then provide it free of charge to SMEs. And I think that's probably a big gap in the industry at the moment, that organisations like ours that have been around for 60 years don't get the funding or even offered the funding to support the SMEs.
I'm here for the rest of the afternoon. You can find me on social media. Reach out if I can help you in any way.
Thank you. Jackie?
I would definitely encourage producers, small businesses to definitely reach out to packaging organisations and utilise the data, the skills, the insights that they have as much as possible, because it can be incredibly valuable. And not everyone's got a packaging technologist sitting there waiting to help them out. So yeah, they can be incredibly valuable to your business.
Please thank Jackie K. Nerida-Kelton and Vikas Ahuja.